Good morning, and welcome to Daily Musings at Unabashedly Resolute Institute. I'm Wes Mullins, and today it's an interesting topic. I found some essays that I wrote 2011, 2012. And it's rather incredible that the content of these essays on political correctness and truth have actually come to pass. I published them on my blog, The Precipice of Wes, and it was encouraging and also troubling, because I mentioned that this notion of relativistic truth. See, here's the thing. Let's back up for a second. Let's get to the crux of this. Let's get to the real heart of this. Postmodernism has a philosophy that wants to bring everybody to the table. It wants to bring and say that everybody gets a seat at the table. That sounds great. Here's the problem. It says that all opinions are equally valid. Here's the problem. Just from the outset, postmodernism sets truth and falsities on equal footing. Optimal and suboptimal, or flourishing and suffering, on the same planes, same consequential planes. Well, the fact of the matter is they're not. Truth and falsity are not on the same consequential plane. If you engage in truthful acts, it will optimize flourishing both in the here and now and also in the future. It may not bring ultimate flourishing now. It may in fact bring suffering now, but in the end it will bring forth the harvest of flourishing. However, if you choose falsity, or if you choose some philosophy that may actually bring flourishing now, it may in fact bring suffering later, because there's a consequence to the action. So, if you believe that all opinions are equally valid, then you're saying, I am promoting the ideology that truth and falsity are on an equal playing field, that cosmically, consequentially, philosophically, psychologically, falsity and truth are equivalents. They are co-equal. It doesn't matter if I choose falsity or if I choose truth. In the end, they are exactly the same thing, and will both bring flourishing, and both will mitigate suffering. That's the proponent. That's what's being proposed, and it's being proposed, but it's not true. It can't be true. I can't say that. I can't say yes, I paid my taxes if I didn't pay my taxes. If everybody in America said, yeah, we paid our taxes, but you didn't, you lied, then the federal government would not have money to waste. If I said to my wife, yes, I've been faithful, and I have not, and that results in a child or another family, and suddenly I have two families, then the flourishing of the relationship and the flourishing of my family will suffer. There are consequences. There is no such thing as truth and falsity being on the same logical, moral, or a consequential plane. But that's what's being proposed. These are equal. equal. And this is where we find ourselves. So, when I say that in 2011, discussing the ideology of political correctness, we could clearly, I say we, as in the apologists and the theologians of the day that were talking about this, the philosophers of the day, we could see very clearly that this was not going to be something that created long-term flourishing. Political correctness. You have to, excuse me. You have to affirm me. You have to call me this certain thing. Microaggressions. How dare you say that to me? You're a misogynist. Why? Because I think that you are. So, let me give you some context here for this, because those are just some of the buzzwords that were thrown out today. The context is the underpinning of this, the philosophy behind this. You always have to go to the philosophy. You have to go to the philosophy to see if the thing that you're promoting actually has a trajectory for flourishing in truth. If it doesn't have a trajectory for flourishing in truth, then if you're aiming at everything, it's the same as if you're aiming at nothing. You'll both hit nothing. Or if you aim at anything, you'll hit nothing. If you aim at nothing, you'll hit anything. So you have to go back to the philosophy. And if you go to your philosophy and you can't pull it apart and it's logically valid, then the aim that you're giving might actually produce something in the future. But if you're not aiming at the thing in the future, then the fact that you're going to hit something akin to flourishing would be an absolute fluke. And honestly, it won't happen. It won't happen except by a rare case of luck. So, what's the philosophy that underpins this notion? Is that the listener, the hearer, and the reader are the sole interpreters of what is being spoken or written or shared. That means that I get to interpret your words any way that I want. Here's the kicker, and you see this today. That only applies to people who don't have the power. What does that go back to? The philosophy that goes back to a will to power philosophy, and that the dichotomy of the haves and the have-nots. If you're a have, then your interpretation has been promoted for so long it needs to be deconstructed, and what needs to be promoted is the have-nots interpretation, because you have simply asserted your will over the have-nots, and so the haves are only have because they have stolen it. Now, this is a euthyphro dilemma. This is a euthyphro dilemma in the fact that you have a false dichotomy going. You have two ideas. You say it's either the haves or the have-nots, and the only reason that the haves and the have-nots could be there is because they stole it. Well, there are the haves or the have-nots, and there's some that kind of have, and there's some that kind of have not. So there's a gradient, and if there's a gradient, it's not a dichotomy, because it's not binary, it's not dualistic. And so what we have is, we have this notion that the only way you get it is if you stole it. Whoa, no, that's true if that's the only option. But if there's a better option, the better option is probably true. Why do the haves have it and the have-nots don't have it? It could be they stole it. And what you mean is they stole the potential, because rich people can't steal from poor people, because poor people have nothing to steal or have little to steal. So what you mean is they have usurped the potential of the poor person to become rich. Economically, there are many theories that prove this to be false. But let's not go with economies right now and economics. Let's go with, so we have this notion of the haves and the have-nots. What is another possibility? The possibility is that the haves are actually competent, and the haves have actually chosen a philosophy that increases flourishing consequentially by the trajectory of their aim. You got me? The haves have things because they are competently they are choosing competent behaviors, and consequentially, that the trajectory of their aim leads them to flourishing because they're aiming at something and they're competent in making that aim come to fruition. And how are they doing it? Because their philosophy allows for them to behave in ways that actually promote flourishing through their mastery and competence of the particular aim that they're going for. It could be math, could be science, could be carpentry, could be whatever. If they master that, they master the certain things in life, and they master certain behaviors, how to win friends and influence people, Dale Carnegie. If you have these things, then you will succeed in life. There are three economical behaviors that you can. There are three behaviors that you can do, three aims that you can have in life. There are three aims that you can have in life. If you do these three aims, then you will not be in poverty. This is what the literature says. This is what economists and psychologists say. There's three that you can do. Number one is get an education. Get educated. It doesn't have to be a high school education, but it has to be the equivalent of a high school education. You have to have a robust understanding of reality and how the world works around you so you can behave inside the laws of reality so that your actions will create good consequences. The second is, don't do drugs. Just don't do drugs. And the third is, don't have a child outside of wedlock. If you do those three things, now a fourth one that happens that you can't control is if you grew up in a two-parent home. So if you have a father in your life, if you have two parents, especially a father, but if you have two parents, you don't do drugs, you finish an education, and you don't have children outside of marriage, you will not be impoverished. Why? Because you are mastering the competency, the consequential competencies that society has shown. It's not because that white people are going, oh, you need to have two parents, you need to not do drugs, you need to not have a baby outside of marriage, and you need to get an education. No, that is not a white supremacist idea being pushed on you. Like, you need to be, if you get a job, you need to be on time. Well, that's not a white supremacist thing. That is a law of gravity inside of an economic consequence that creates a consequence of flourishing. If you're not on time, you can't produce a product good enough that people will want to buy. And if you do produce a product, you will be inconsistent in the way which you distribute it, which will mean people get frustrated and tired and won't put up with the antics. And so how do we create products that are good, that people want, that are competent, and that we create companies that allow people to have confidence and trust in our products so that they will enact in a transaction with us? We do that by being on time. We do that by mastering the skill level required for us to do the job. The consequence of that is we produce a good product and we distribute it efficiently and effectively, and we have a customer service line that takes care of our customers, so we have customer retention. And those things are not white supremacists. Those things are laws of logic inside of economics. If you do those things, the consequence is flourishing, and the flourishing creates wealth, and wealth creates security. The reason why I think that all these organizations are attacking the Western way of life is because they have this idea that the colonialism, that the colonies, that the colonialism, that white powers came in and overthrew nations, stole their wealth to build themselves up, and then promoted themselves like heroes. And if all things were equal, this philosophies today, that the primal culture would be just as successful as the quote-unquote colonial cultures. Now, two things can be true at one time. Europeans did try to colonize the world. And colonials, the colonizers, were in fact, a lot of times, horrible to those they captured. That is true. Now, all things being equal, like the Aztecs and the Incas and some primal cultures also were not so nice to each other. If you look at the territorial map of what we call America now, and you look at the Native American, whose land is it? We have no idea, because each tribe was their own nation, and you see the growth and expansion of tribes and the reduction of land and expansion of land. They had battles and wars and everything that is pointed right now at Europeans for having colonialistic intentions. Every negative against Western thought and colonialism, those same sins, if you will, were also being perpetrated and committed. They were being committed by the primal cultures as well. Why? Because barbarism is a natural state of man, not civility. So what, in my estimation, what allowed England to become a world power, where at one point they had 1 billion people under the monarchical rule? 1 billion people back in the 1700s. What allowed that? Their philosophies of efficiency and competence allowed them to create wealth. Wealth allowed them to usurp power, but it wasn't because they usurped power that they had power. It was because they found and discovered philosophies about life and reality that allowed them to take advantage of reality to aim at a trajectory of total world domination, and they nearly succeeded because of their philosophies. Not all of that was good. However, let's look at the fact that if all things were equal, why then weren't these other primal cultures? So if their literature, I heard somebody say the other day to me, I'm rambling now, because I'm actually not actually rambling. What I'm doing is I'm working through this. This is the daily musings I'm using on this. This is something I've been chewing on, and so the other stuff that I articulated a few minutes ago, that stuff has that's decades old. I've refined and regurgitated that, and and I have that distilled down. That's probably a better euphemism. I've distilled that down to where it's really fine. But this notion, what I'm talking about now, is something I've just begun to pull the threads on, and so I'm trying to articulate it the best I can, because this is amusing. I don't. All this may not be true. I'm saying this is what I think possibly could have happened. And so the philosophies that were used by so these primal cultures, I had somebody the other day say that the West only brought back from other cultures the books that we already agreed with. There were other pieces of literature that we rejected, and because we were the haves, therefore whatever literature we brought back that already affirmed our philosophies, we deemed worthy, and the other ones that didn't were unworthy. So my question is, if this is true, why then weren't these other cultures as efficient and as flourishing as the West? Why weren't they why weren't they flourishing? Why was their great suffering in those. That may be a hyperbolic statement there. But if their philosophies created great cultures, then why did they take children, like let's take a culture in Ethiopia that I know of, that they take, if your child is born with the bottom teeth first instead of the top teeth first, they take him out in near the riverbank, tie him to a tree, and let crocodiles eat him or her because because of demons in the child. Okay? Philosophies have consequences. That philosophy is not a philosophy that creates and promotes human flourishing. It actually does quite the opposite. It creates suffering, because you create consequential behaviors wherein families look at their daughter or son that's just born and think they're a demon because of the way their teeth came in. So, in the West, we began to promote life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And we began to value life as sacred. Where does that come from? That comes from a philosophy of Imago Dei. Each of us carries a divine spark. We are made in the image of God. So when I see someone's face, I am seeing a representation, an image of God. And so therefore it is very, very hard to sorry, I just saw an accident on the road. It is very hard to see that and go, well, you didn't master the subject matter. We have dentistry. We know that sometimes teeth come in the bottom. It has nothing to do with the spiritual thing. It has to do with an aspect of biology. Now, I'm not saying if I believe in the supernatural, so I'm not going to say that there's aren't certain things that happen biologically that couldn't be attributed to the supernatural. But I'm saying on average, those things don't have anything to do with the supernatural. And so you create a philosophy that you haven't mastered the subject matter. The West have sent people into space. We've mastered the subject matter. We've sent people into the... there is no environment in the West. There's no environment that people from the West have not conquered. Now you can say, well, the East as well. Yes. Now what is it about the East? What philosophy does the East have that also allows them inside of their autocratic and dictatorial economic structures and governing structures, what still allows them to do great things? Because they are aiming at mastery of the content matter. Now, how do we go about it in the West? It's voluntary. If you want to become a scientist, it's on you. Our militaries are voluntary. You go to the East, they have the same trajectory and the same goal, yet it is compulsory. And that is the difference. In America, we are about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In the West, they are about the advancement of the state. You are a cog in the machine. In the West, the government is the cog, and the people are the machine. Our society and our culture is the machine, and the government is just a cog in it, something that helps us and should be protecting our rights. So, circle back around. How do I know that these philosophies being promoted today with BLM and white supremacy and white fragility and all the things that are being promoted as white supremacists and haves and have-nots, and you need to, everything's racist, anti-racism, all of this has nothing to do with the actual idea of race. Now, for some people it does, but I'm telling you, the philosophy behind it, if you go to the philosophy behind it and see what the consequential aim is, you will understand that this is an economic and a governmental coup. That's a strong statement, isn't it? Yes, it is a strong statement. Why do I say that? Because it is anti-American. There is no way that people who love the Constitution, people who love Judeo-Christian values, could ever come up with a philosophy such as anti-racism, BLM, or communism, or socialism, or the ideas being promoted today, critical race theory. You cannot be an American, you cannot be a Christian and come up with the idea of this. Why? Because because you are disallowed from doing that, because you say, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that every man is created equal. And we have the right to, and endowed with inalienable rights from our Creator to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I did not get that right. I did better than Joe Biden, though. So, how does someone get there? How does someone get to a prayer? This is from some anti-racist leader. God, help me to hate white people. How does someone get there from Christianity? Well, you can't, because you're supposed to love and forgive. And Jesus says to love your enemies, love your neighbors. This radical love, absolutely radical love. Well, if you believe in Judeo-Christian values of forgiveness and reconciliation, and you believe in the power of forgiveness and grace, because Jesus died on the cross for you and gave a great sacrifice for you, if you believe in the concept that I have rights given to me that are not by God, the only way that you get to the thoughts of critical race theory and anti-racism and believing in socialism is the right way to do this, and it's not free market, it's not voluntarism, it's collectivism, not individualism. The only way that you get there is if you find a way to say that the Declaration, they didn't mean it. The Bible, they didn't mean it. It's not true. And you begin to pull America, and you begin to have the idea that America is simply a plot of land. And I love America. What they're saying is, I love this land, the actual physical land. I love the buildings, and I love my house. I love my family. They're not saying they love the idea of America, or else they could not have come up with critical race theory. There's no way possible to love the idea of America and to have a theory of critical race theory. Why? Because the philosophical underpinnings of critical race theory is a will to power philosophy, not a will to meaning philosophy. The United States Constitution and Judeo-Christian values says there is suffering. How do I find meaning? It's a will to mean. These are will to meanings. And you find will to meaning in truth, in liberty, and pursuing truth and liberty. The Bible says that Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and life. So by setting your trajectory on something that you're like, oh, it's unattainable. Of course it's unattainable. But that doesn't mean that we don't try. That doesn't mean that we don't push. That doesn't mean that we don't aim at the thing that's unattainable. Because if we aim at it and we create our behaviors in such a way that consequentially we're aiming and we are pursuing the greatest political statement ever, the greatest political doctrine ever, that we're individuals and we have rights not given to us by government, so therefore government cannot take those rights away. We have the right to our own thoughts, we have the right to our own speech, we have the right to assembly, we have the right to publish whatever we want to publish, we have the right to defend ourselves, we have the right to a jury trial of our peers, we have a right not to have our stuff taken. Basically, if you want to encapsulate it, leave us alone and don't take our stuff. That is basically the underpinnings of the Bill of Rights. And I don't think there's any country that has a Bill of Rights like ours. And there have been no countries. So why is America so great? Because you beat up everybody, you're a bully. Or our political trajectory, our aim politically is such that it creates behaviors that help cultivate ultimate and optimal flourishing above all other nations. There's not a nation who can compete with the U.S. Why? Because our aim, because of our philosophical underpinnings. That doesn't mean we do everything right. That doesn't mean that everything about America is correct. What it means is it's better than anywhere else. It's the best thing ever put on a piece of paper about the philosophies that create the most flourishing, about a great political aim. It is the best document out there. And the only way that you get to critical race theory, the only way you get to anti-racism is if you say, there's something better. The only reason that America is good is because my ideas haven't been tried yet. No, your ideas have been tried. Every idea has been tried in the last 6,000 years. And the only idea to produce societies of voluntarism and individualism that creates a middle class, that creates wealth, that actually gives money to other nations to help their poverty, that takes care of and defends other countries who can't defend themselves. Only one country engages in warfare that is not sadistic and barbaric, because our political aim was one that we see individuals as people. Now, that doesn't mean that every individual sees everybody as individuals. It doesn't mean that everybody in government or everybody in America does the right thing. It means that our aim is correct. And when we turn our eyes upon that aim and we recalibrate our behavior towards that aim, that we have the consequence of human flourishing. Critical race theory and anti-racism are not equivalent. Socialism is not equivalent. Socialism is not equivalent to capitalism. It is not. It is not. It is not. It fails every time. Why? Because the aim is bad. The philosophical underpinnings are will to power. Equity of outcome. It's impossible to have equity of outcome. Philosophy matters, and we have been taught over the last 20 or 30 years to dismiss philosophy. Why? Because we had it so good, in our lives that philosophy was this old antiquated thing of white tower people just sitting there thinking up crap. No, it was people saying, how can we aim better to create better human flourishing? Let's see this thought. Let's play this thought out. Philosophy is saying, here's a thought. Let's run it out. Logically, let's go ahead and go, oh, I don't want that thought. That's bad. C.S. Lewis does this with pacifism. He's like, listen, if a majority of a nation said, hey, we're going to be pacifist, 60-40, we are going to be a pacifistic nation, they would be a pacifistic nation for exactly 10 minutes. Because some barbaristic nation would come through and say, oh, you guys aren't going to fight and defend yourselves? Yeah, I'll take over. So therefore, pacifism is not equal to just war. They are not equivalent philosophically. They will not lead to the same flourishing ends. One will end in great suffering and disaster, and one might end in disaster, but at least you got a shot. At least you got a chance. All right. It's a little bit long today. Had a longer drive into town. So these are some thoughts I'm working through and pushing on. If you have any thoughts, send some comments. Go to iTunes and leave a review, 5 stars only, please. Just whatever you want to do. Also, this was brought to you by unabashedlyresolute.com. Go there, check it out, sign up for a class. You get to have lessons with me. It's going to be lots of fun. Also, go to magicisessential.com if you want to learn about holistic health. My wife and I became crunchy a couple of years ago, and it has been the greatest thing that we've ever done in our lives. We don't get sick anymore. It's been like 4 or 5 years since we've been sick. It's incredible. We have created a lifestyle. Again, we have created a lifestyle of flourishing because philosophically we understand what we eat and we understand why we're eating it. and therefore the things we're putting in our body actually create flourishing. You're like, well, I don't like the taste of that. Well, you may not like the taste of that now. Your body will adapt, and you'll suffer through a little taste now. And by the way, the stuff we eat is fantastic, but some people have that argument. But in the end, you get great flourishing. My kids aren't sick. We're not sick. Everybody's healthy. We have clear minds and clear brains. And when you have clear brains and clear minds, and you have hormones that are correctly balanced, then you get to make better decisions. You make better decisions, and you actually become a master of your body biologically. Then you create behaviors that promote optimal flourishing. It's the same. It's the same. It's the same. It's the same. Your philosophy dictates behavior. Behavior will promote philosophy, and it'll go around and around. It'll be promoting each other. That's not circular. What I'm saying is, we have behaviors, and they're like, well, why did I act like that? I act like that because of this, and then we believe that, and then we continue on with the behavior. But if we can get to the philosophical underpinnings of who we are and what we are and why we believe what we believe, then maybe we can create new behaviors, and we can open up things in our lives that we didn't know was possible. And in doing so, we might just create long-term flourishing. This has been Wes Mullins with Unabashedly Resolute. See you guys later.